When Thanos snapped his fingers, he not only dealt the Avengers a devastating loss, but he fundamentally altered the universe forever. And even though the Avengers assembled and saved the day, it's not like they completely reversed the situation. 5 years have now passed in the MCU, and so far, the effect of such a cataclysmic event seems somewhat downplayed. But we think changes could be in store for Phase 4 and beyond, and it might just include everyone's favorite secondary superhero team, the Defenders. Big shout out to Redditor Clubfoot for this fun theory. And although we're not saying this is exactly what's going to happen, we can all dream, right? So let's get into it right now. Spider-Man Far From Home not only had the instrumental role of following Avengers Endgame, but it also had the important task of defining what the landscape of the MCU looked like after the Avengers saved the day. And we applaud the MCU for not taking the easy way out here. Think about it. The simple solution for Endgame would have been to have our heroes reverse everything and make it so Thanos never snapped his fingers in the first place. Or somehow snapped everyone back at the exact moment they left. But since you're like us and probably have seen the movie 3,000 times by now, you know that's not how things go. Instead, when Hulk snapped his fingers, he brings everyone back exactly how they were in their same locations in present day. And really, that's the smart move. It's better than trying to rewrite timelines and get into even more confusing time travel stuff. Because when your directors and writers disagree about how time travel works in the movie, then it's best not to dive down that rabbit hole. So the way they handled it was the best they could have done, even if it raised some serious eyebrows about the logistics of such an event. So Hulk snapped everyone back exactly where they were, but what about the people who disappeared in airplanes? Or in their cars in the middle of traffic? Or what about the astronauts playing space golf on the moon, huh? Did they come back in their exact positions and immediately perish? This has been one of the biggest questions fans have raised since the movie came out, and Kevin Feige and his band of merry men have gone on record to set the record straight. He says Hulk was smart enough to know that when snapping everyone back, to make sure that anyone who is in a dangerous situation was not immediately placed back in that dangerous situation. So if someone disappeared on an airplane, then they appeared on ground when they returned. Smart thinking, Hulk. No wonder they call you Professor Hulk. But even this revelation caused the MCU to do some course corrections. On the official Daily Bugle website, which launched around the time Spider-Man Far From Home released on DVD, and has since been updating its website, there's a section where people talk about what they were doing when they were snapped out of existence and when they came back. They're lighthearted and a lot of fun. For example, there's a brief blurb about how a surgeon was in the middle of open heart surgery when she disappeared, but luckily her patient also disappeared, so when they both reappeared, the doctor finished up the surgery. But one blurb had to be retracted after Kevin Feige went on record to clear up the whole airplane situation. The original blurb said how a stuntman was performing a stunt for a movie when he dove off a building, but disappeared halfway down. He reappeared 5 years later still falling and suffered serious injuries. But then the retraction said that they actually discovered the stuntman was lying about disappearing just to get insurance money. It was a smart way to fix the story in a way that didn't contradict what Feige had just revealed about the safety of those who Hulk brought back. And let's talk about that name for a minute, the Blip. For the longest time in between Infinity War and Endgame, Marvel Studios was keeping quiet about what exactly Thanos did and the world he created. It forced fans to come up with their own names like the Decimation and the Snap. When they finally revealed that the event would be called the Blip, fans were already so used to calling it something else. So once again, Feige explained that the Snap is the name of the event that happened when Thanos snapped his fingers the first time, and the Blip is when everyone returned at the end of Endgame. So that's coming straight from the head honcho's mouth. But as much of a major event both the Snap and the Blip was to the entire universe, the MCU has really seemed to downplay exactly what happened during that time period. Spider-Man Far From Home and the entire MCU Spider-Man franchise is more lighthearted, and therefore they address the implications of the Blip as more of a joke. The movie started off with a student news report that mainly showed a marching band colliding with a basketball team, and students being upset that kids were 5 years younger than they are now in their grade. But that's about it. Spider-Man is supposed to be a lot more fun, so we understand why it didn't want to explore how depressed the world was without half of its population. But in reality, it was an incredibly major event that changed absolutely everything within the MCU. Even the gone but not forgotten Netflix MCU shows. And it's those specific Defenders where the bulk of our theory today is going to discuss. Remember how excited we were when Netflix and Marvel teamed up to produce a series of television shows on the streaming service that were more adult-oriented stories set within the MCU centering around the Defenders? It was an exciting time to be sure, and we were introduced to the likes of Daredevil, Jessica Jones, Luke Cage, Iron Fist, and The Punisher, alongside some scene-stealing supporting characters. Some shows were more well-received than others, while others struggled to find their proper footing. Iron Fist, we're looking at you. But overall, it was an ambitious experiment to expand the MCU brand to a wider audience, and in those early years, we'd call it a major success. As exciting as it was to see these characters get their own shows, it got us all clamoring for a time when we could see the Defenders team up with the Avengers in a later movie. Sadly, this was a dream that was crushed quicker than a bullet fired at Luke Cage. After some time, there were some rumblings that Netflix, Marvel TV, and the movie-focused Marvel Studios weren't getting along as well as fans would hope. And when Disney Plus was announced to be in the works, it seemed like the writing was on the wall. Sure enough, one by one, each of Netflix shows felt a cold chill of cancellation. And for a time, it seemed like we'd never see these characters in the MCU again. But is that really the case? Could Avengers Endgame and The Blip actually have set up a good path to reintroduce the Defenders back into the MCU down the line? According to Redditor Clobfoot, it's a definite possibility, and we've got to say we like this idea. Per the theory, the whole Thanos wiping out the universe for 5 years thing is a great way to act like a soft reboot for the characters. Look at it this way. Say the Defenders weren't part of that half that were erased and therefore lived an additional 5 years after their respective stories and shows came to an end. We know what are the odds all the Defenders would stay alive, but then again, it looks like all Spider-Man's classmates were snapped away and came back together, so it could happen. This creates what is ultimately a blank slate for these characters to return one day to the MCU without being bogged down with unfinished storylines or threads from the television shows. We won't spoil the endings of the Netflix shows here in case there are a few of you who still haven't caught up. And to those people we say, what are you waiting for? But some of them felt like a good conclusion, while others were definitely more of a cliffhanger. At that time, you couldn't just put them in a movie without tying up some plot points from their respective series. But now, with 5 years have passed, it's all okay. Whatever problems the Defenders were facing individually could have been wrapped up off screen, and the Defenders that we would meet in Phase 4 or beyond could be almost completely different. We're not saying their personalities would change all that much, but just a lot of the internal and external problems they were dealing with would be a thing of the past. There's a lot of reasons why this would be a good idea, and not just because we're definitely jonesing for more Jessica Jones. We like this theory because it paves the way for an eventual Defenders movie down the line. And we think we can all agree on how awesome it would be to see the Defenders on the big screen fighting side by side once again. The Defenders miniseries that served as a TV level of the Avengers was ultimately a little disappointing due to pacing issues. In fact, all of the heroes' individual seasons of television all suffered from pacing issues at one time or another, which is why we think they belong on the big screen. At the time, it was great that we could binge watch the entire seasons of these shows at once, but because of these long seasons, it was often a slog to get through all of it. Smaller team-up movies we think are the future of the MCU. Now that the Avengers all have assembled in Endgame, we think pairing these heroes off in teams will be more commonplace going forward. Where a few years ago, a lot of us would scoff at the idea of putting 4 lead characters in a movie, Marvel has since proved it's not only possible, but actually more beneficial to all characters to give them strong characters to bounce off of. The Defenders heroes could come in almost fully formed for 2 very important reasons. For one, a majority of Marvel fans will already be familiar with the characters thanks to their TV shows. Like we wouldn't need to dive in fully on how Iron Fist became Iron Fist, or why Jessica Jones is a private detective, because we all know these things. And 2, audiences are over origin stories. We've been getting similar variations to the same old origin stories for years now in the MCU, and we have finally entered a stage where audiences want different types of storytelling. Forget the origins of the Defenders, we just want to see them working together again. So does this mean all the Netflix shows will be for nothing? Well, of course not. All the Netflix shows had value, well, almost all of them, as Iron Fist Season 1 was hard to watch because most episodes were filled with lackluster fight scenes, and Danny shouting how he was the immortal Iron Fist every minute. Sorry, we're still a little upset about that. But anyways, yes, all the Netflix shows are still canon, and everything that happened and could still be referenced in a future movie. But not enough where a general audience member has to go back and watch all the seasons to understand what's happening. It's really the best of both worlds as we get to continue the stories of characters that we grew to love and want to see more of, while also transitioning the Defenders into major big screen roles. Hardcore fans would already know all the intricate background details of each character, while general audiences could fall in love with them for the very first time. And really, we believe a Defenders movie needs to come out soon. It looks like the future of the MCU will be split between Earth and space. Spider-Man is supposed to be our biggest street-level hero, but given all the recent drama, we think it's a safe bet to say that even though Spider-Man is back in the MCU now, there's a chance we might lose him again. So, the MCU needs to introduce the street-level focal point. The Defenders are the very definition of street-level, and we think a movie focused on their exploits could be exactly what the MCU needs. The snap and the blip might have caused a lot of people serious psychological harm, but Thanos would very much become our hero if his actions were the reason we got to see the Defenders together again. We know this is a long shot theory, as Disney seems to have shut the door on the Defenders for now, to focus on their own type of miniseries on Disney+. But we won't give up hope. Defenders assemble! What do you guys think? Do you hope to see the Defenders someday on the big screen? And do you think Thanos helped pave the way for that? Anything that would get the Defenders in our lives, we'd have to say we're okay with. Whatever it takes, right? Be sure to tell us if you think the Defenders can make their grand return to the MCU or not down in the comments. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button once you're done. As always, thanks for watching.